I appreciate that introduction, and I appreciate all of you for joining this call. I hope this session proves to be informative and helpful to you. I imagine you've joined us because your pay is important to you. I think it's important to a lot of us. As professionals, as people, our pay makes a huge difference on our lives and the quality of our lives. And so I hope in this session, you feel like you can walk away with a better understanding of how pay is administered here at the university, and feel equipped to sit and talk to your supervisor about your pay level. If you're a supervisor, I also want you to feel equipped to respond to questions about pay. So we're going to talk about all of those things today. To give you just a quick session overview, here are the topics that I'm going to be talking about. You'll notice that talking about pay, the headliner, actually comes a little bit later, because I want to start by giving you a broader context about how we administer pay at the university, starting with what we're trying to achieve here. I'm going to describe our compensation vision statement, and then I'm going to go into the how. How do we create these structures in order to administer pay? How do they work? And what are the core fundamentals that lead to the different programs that we offer? From there, I'll talk about leadership's role. As you sit and you think about asking your supervisor, why am I paid what I'm paid? Is there any chance to increase my pay? It helps to understand what kinds of things your supervisor makes decisions about and how those decisions affect the compensation you receive or the classification you hold. And then after I've covered all those things, we'll actually talking about pay. I'm going to offer some advice about going about that conversation effectively. Then I want you to recognize some additional resources that are out there. I am going to have a Q&A at the end. As Amy indicated, please enter questions in the chat. The wonderful comp team members have joined me on the call today, and they're going to respond to your questions. But if those questions aren't answered, we'll ensure that they
Stacie, I just lost sound for you.
at hr.unm.edu. Okay.
We just got it back. Your sound cut out just for a moment, but now you're back.
Okay. So maybe I'll just repeat the last thing.
That would be great.
Hopefully it came through.
Thank you.
So enter your questions over chat, just like Amy indicated at the beginning. We have comp team members who will respond. If that question's not answered, we're going to ensure it gets answered during the Q&A. And if we still aren't able to get to it, or by chance, if you don't feel comfortable asking a question in this format, you're welcome to contact us after the presentation. We can be reached at comp@unm.edu. Okay, so with that, let's dive in. Kate, again, Amy, feel free to interrupt if my sound goes off. I'm happy to switch to a different method.
Thanks so much. It is perfect right now.
Okay, good. Hopefully it stays that way. Okay, so as I said a minute ago, your pay is important to you. It makes a big difference in your decision to come to UNM and to stay at UNM. And for those reasons, pay is important to UNM as well. Your compensation, the classification you hold, plays a vital role in our ability to attract.
Ooh, Stacie, we've lost your sound again.
Can you confirm if you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me clearly too? Sometimes.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I apologize, everyone. Everything was working great until we got started. So hopefully it keeps up a little bit longer. So what I was saying, in case I cut out again, is that our compensation programs play a vital role in attracting people to work here and engaging people with meaningful work. We want to ensure that there's a clear line of sight between the tasks and responsibilities that you perform every day and our overall success as an institution. Of course, compensation can help keep great people here, and these comp and class structures serve to help us develop staff while you're here. We want to ensure it's clear how you grow and develop within your job and potentially hold other positions while at the institution. Because compensation matters, the institution has a compensation vision statement for staff, and you can actually read it. It's publicly available on our website at the link shown here. This vision statement helps guide our day-to-day decisions about what employees are paid, as well as our decisions about the big projects that we have to enhance our compensation and classification structures. And this isn't just a vision statement that the nice people over in comp made up. This is something that's been ratified by the president and her executive cabinet. That includes the top administrators at the institution. So it truly serves as the university's compensation vision statement. Now I'm going to go over a few of the highlights, including the guiding principles in that vision statement. I feel like these ones in particular that are in bold and colorful on the slide are really important as we talk about having conversations about pay. And those include the principles of transparency, objectivity, and consistency. We want to ensure that as we make compensation decisions, we're doing so in alignment with these guiding principles. Because when we do, we are better able to ensure that our compensation programs are fair and equitable. Also, we want to be accountable to the citizens of New Mexico who help fund so much of the university's operations. And so we need to demonstrate that we are using those funds effectively. As I said, I think these particular guiding principles are critical as we start talking about pay. We want supervisors and employees to feel comfortable having conversations about pay, because doing so can help eliminate confusion. We don't want you to be out there wondering, why am I paid what I'm paid? Why is the person next to me paid what they're paid? We really want you to understand how these decisions are made and also hold us accountable. So being able to have conversations about pay helps reduce bias in the way that pay is administered. We have to defend our decisions and ensure that we can do so based on business operations. It can also improve working relationships. We recognize that talking about pay isn't easy. It feels kind of uncomfortable. And so it's important that you have a relationship based on trust with your supervisor. Being able to talk about this enhances that trust and improves your overall collaboration and camaraderie. So it's important. And that's why we wanted to take some time to share this during Staff Success Days. And as I said, we're going to provide some specific advice on how you can sit and actually go about that conversation effectively. Now, I imagine that part of the reason you may be interested in talking to your supervisor about your pay is that you may have a question. Am I being paid enough? Is there any chance that I could be paid more? Well, if you took some time and went to Google, you could Google this question. You could ask, how do I know if I'm paid fairly? And your search results would include dozens upon dozens of websites that will promise to answer that question. Calculators and databases and articles that all claim to say, this is what you should be paid. Now, these websites are wonderful demonstrations of the progress towards pay transparency. However, they vary significantly in their applicability to you, as well as the reliability, integrity, and quality of the data that they provide. So while you may still want to look at these websites, I encourage you to consider them as just one reference point. And rather, I'm going to focus today on pay at UNM. How do we structure our pay programs? How do we make pay decisions? What is the role of a leader in making those decisions? Because that truly is going to be applicable to you. So with that, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into our compensation vision statement. If you know what we're trying to achieve, hopefully it makes more sense as you learn more of how we try to achieve it. as I said, this vision statement is published on our website. You can see a lot of the vision statement right here. I'm not going to read through it, but I do want to summarize some important points. As we administer pay at UNM, we strive to balance two somewhat opposing forces. That is the external environment and our internal environment. We look externally to try to understand what makes a rate competitive. What are other employers offering in order to attract talented employees to perform certain job duties and responsibilities? The talented staff in HR compensation conducts market reviews in order to hone in on that dollar amount. All right, can you hear me now? It looks like I got muted for a second.
Yes.
We are good.
Good, good. The other thing we have to look at is our internal environment. How do we structure jobs currently at UNM? What are the hierarchies between roles? How does work flow from one position to another? And what kinds of jobs are comparable in nature and should be paid in comparable ways? And so we're looking at both of these things to try to balance what we should pay for a certain job. But we also want to consider the people in those jobs. We want to reward individuals for performing well and for bringing to the institution their unique qualifications and background. And we also want to offer robust rewards that recognize that there are many things important to you as an individual. Yes, your pay is important, but there are other things too that can drive your satisfaction in your job and your choice to work at UNM. So with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of total rewards. As you look at this wheel, you can see that compensation is a component of the rewards you receive. And I am definitely going to advocate all day long on every soapbox I get that compensation is important. But it's also important to recognize that it is one piece in an overall rewards pie. There are many things that can demonstrate the value you bring to the institution and the value you get from working here, including robust benefits, opportunities to develop and grow within your role, enhancing your knowledge, skills, and abilities, improving your performance on the job, making the work you do interesting and engaging, balancing your work and your life effectiveness, recognizing that you have both personal and professional priorities that you want to attend to, and recognizing the work you do. So later in this presentation, as we talk more about talking about pay, I want you to continue to think about this wheel and recognize that there may be other opportunities for you to draw increased value from your job here at the institution that may be related to pay, or perhaps are complemented with some other total reward options. Okay, so that tells you a little bit more of what we try to achieve with our compensation programs and structures. Let me transition to tell you a little bit more of how we do it, how we get there. And to describe that, I think it's helpful to go over some fundamentals of compensation and classification, beginning with defining two of the terms you see on this slide: compensation, classification. Already you've heard me kind of drop these terms and maybe they feel a little interchangeable. Let me take a moment to really define them. When we talk about compensation, we're talking about what you are paid. And really specifically, I'm talking about what we call your base salary rate. So not so much overtime or shift differentials or non-standard rewards you receive. I'm talking about the bulk of your paycheck, that dollar figure that you saw when you signed your offer letter. That is what I'm talking about when we come to compensation. Now, what you're paid is connected to the job that you do, hence the overlapping Venn diagram. But your classification really pertains to the work you perform. And as you can see on this slide, there are many different factors that affect both of these things. So beginning with compensation, I'm going to work at the bottom of the circle up to the top, beginning with available budget. Available budget is the starting point for determining what you're paid. We prefer to pay employees with real money, and so we have to ensure that the money that we have available is enough to pay employees, and we're also paying you based on money that we actually have. From there, we then look at these other factors. Market rate. As I just described, HR compensation collects important information about pay. We collect this from third-party vendors, and we determine what is a competitive market rate for the different work that employees perform at UNM. But we also make pay decisions based on you as an individual and what you bring to your job. What kinds of valuable skills do you hold? What's your education and training? Do you have higher level training and education that relates to the work that you perform? What's your experience? How much experience do you have navigating the situations you do in your job, performing the tasks that you perform now for us? What's your performance level? How well have you demonstrated your capacity to perform your job? Are you successful? Are you more than successful? And then lastly, but very importantly, what are we paying others to perform similar work with similar qualifications? This is what we talk about when we talk about equity. We want to ensure that employees are paid in a consistent and fair manner. So not only do we have to look at individuals and what they bring, we also have to look at groups of individuals, their qualifications, their performance, their work. Now, these things are tied to the job classification you hold. And that job classification is going to be constituted of duties and responsibilities you perform. And part of that is still looking externally. What are the typical expectations for an individual to perform the kind of work that you're asked to perform here at UNM? Let's say you hold an accountant job. Your accountant job should be sufficiently similar to other accounting jobs at other employers in order to make sense and to ensure that we can recruit people to do the work that we need performed here. Additionally, when we define jobs and classifications, we also look at other jobs. How does your job relate to other positions at UNM? What kind of authority do you have to direct the work of others, to commit university resources, and to make vital decisions that impact your organization? What's the scope of impact of that work? Do you impact the operations of a team, of a department, of a division, school, college? Do you impact the entire institution? And that ties to level of accountability. What milestones, what deliverables are you responsible for achieving in the scope of your job? These are all factors we take into account when we're considering your job classification. I find it really helpful to define these things separately because as I start to talk about our structures and our programs, I'm going to connect these concepts together so you can see how they relate to what you're actually paid. But before I get there, there's one more set of definitions that I want to separate out. And those are the concept of the job and the person who holds the job. These are incredibly important to distinguish because sometimes in your day-to-day work, they can get kind of muddied. And when we consider opportunities to adjust your pay, to adjust your job title, it helps us to define these things separately so that we can identify the best mechanism to use in order to address a particular situation. So let's begin with the job. Your job is comprised of duties and responsibilities, and those things are meant to help achieve your organization's mission. It has a defined market value. So there is a dollar figure associated with doing certain kinds of work. We don't put dollar figures on people. People are priceless, but the job itself does have a defined market value. And you'll see again in a moment how we determine what that is. And a job can be vacant or filled. Now, the person who holds a job performs those duties and responsibilities, and they bring to their job their own unique background, your experiences, your knowledge, your unique skills, your training and education. And those things equip you to perform your job with varying degrees of success. People may perform less than expectations. Maybe they meet expectations, maybe they exceed them. That's all about the person and what they're bringing to their job. So again, it's really helpful to pull these ideas apart so that as we talk about structures, we can bring them back together and hopefully they make sense. So let me do that. I'm going to begin by connecting this idea of classification and compensation. We employ a lot of people at UNM. Thousands of employees work here, performing a vast variety of duties and responsibilities that help the university be successful. As I mentioned at the start, we strive to ensure that we administer pay in a consistent and objective manner that's fair and equitable. And so in order to do that, we have to group jobs in ways that help us to administer pay in that consistent manner. That's where a classification system comes in. I'm going to read this one line because I feel like it's really helpful in describing classifications. Official job classifications help categorize, describe, and group similar positions used in a variety of settings. Our classifications are fairly broad. So perhaps you hold a position and you know other people in the same job classification, and maybe you're thinking, I don't do the exact same thing as that other person. That's not the point of the classification. We are trying to group jobs that are similar, though they may not be exactly the same. Again, the whole point here is ensuring that people who are doing sufficiently similar work are paid in sufficiently similar ways. So to guide those pay decisions, our job classifications are assigned to grade levels situated in our staff salary structure that provides a band in which we can pay employees within. There are very few exceptions to this, though there are a few jobs that do not fall into this. I imagine for the majority of you, though, you know that your job classification is tied to a number. Grade 5, grade 12, grade 18. Those grades show up in our staff salary structure. This is also published to our website. I apologize for not including the link here. But here you can see the pay ranges associated with each of those grade numbers. And if you pay attention to this structure, you're going to see that there is huge variety here. If we look at the bottom of the very bottom grade, we start employees at $10.50 an hour here at UNM, but we could pay employees all the way up to $133.72 an hour. Huge differences there. So how do we hone in on exactly what a position should be paid? I'm going to start by talking about a job and how we determine job pay levels. Let's say the institution decided that we have a need to create a new classification of office superhero because we've got enough employees out there who are performing this work. We need a new category. The HR compensation team conducts an evaluation of market and determines that a market going rate for office superhero is about $43,000 a year. Okay, that helps us hone in quite a bit. If we look at grade 8 up through grade 13, $43,000 a year fits into all of these grades. Now, at a grade 8, $43,000 a year is at the top. So we run the risk of actually paying employees too low if we were to bring them in at the bottom of the band. If we assign it to grade 13, 43 is at the bottom. So we run the risk of overpaying employees if they come in towards the top. So we assign grades based on the middle of the salary range, called a midpoint. You may have heard us say in the past, midpoint is market. This is what we mean. It's not exact match here, 42,494, is pretty close though to 43,000. And this ensures that whether we bring in an office superhero at the bottom or the top of the grade, all of the individuals in this classification are going to be paid with approximately the same distance away from that market going rate. How do we decide exactly what an individual should be paid? Because this is still pretty wide variability from 29,000 to 55,000. We're going to look at that person and what they uniquely bring to the job. If an individual is relatively early in their career, they meet the minimum qualifications of their job, but they're going to learn a lot while performing this job and gain experiences that will enhance their capacity to perform and add value. In those cases, it makes sense to pay an individual lower on the salary band compared to someone who's well-established or very well-established in their career. The idea here is that the more experience you gain, the more education you gain that's directly related to the work you perform, the better equipped you are to navigate new situations, come up with creative solutions, and solve day-to-day problems in ways that enhance our performance as an institution. So we want to recognize that with higher levels of pay. Now, this slide shows you a concept. The idea is aligning your pay along the salary band. It doesn't infer exact placement. So maybe you're thinking to yourself, I've done my job for a really long time. I'm definitely very well established. Why am I not paid at third quartile? Remember that Venn diagram. There are many factors that contribute to your compensation. However, the Division of Human Resources is working on tools and resources to help organizations to figure out, okay, where exactly on this band should I pay an individual? So we are working on ways to enhance that process. In the meantime, I want you to think about this conceptually and perhaps consider in a frank and honest way for yourself, where do you fall along this career progression and what would make sense in terms of salary? As you consider talking to your supervisor, this is really helpful to think about in advance. Okay, so that now describes kind of generally how these structures are created, why they are created the way they are created. Let's talk about the leaders in your organization and how their decisions affect your compensation and your classification. Leaders across UNM are tasked with guiding the day-to-day activities of their organizations. Whether you are a dean of a large school or college or a frontline supervisor with a small team of individuals supporting you, you make decisions about how to help your organization be successful. And those decisions affect your employees' job classifications and compensation. It affects job classification because as a leader, you are set with delegating tasks and responsibilities and ensuring that they are performed effectively. As you delegate those tasks, it's going to affect how work is described and categorized, and therefore how employees are classified. Additionally, you impact your employees' compensation. You are responsible for evaluating your employees' performance and for assessing their unique qualifications and how equipped they are to perform on the job. Maybe you don't have ultimate authority to decide like exactly what an employee is paid. Maybe you have to consult with others, but your assessment of your employees' qualifications to the job and their performance directly impacts their compensation levels. Now that's not all, there's also more. Leaders are also responsible for ensuring equity across their organizations. So not only do you have to consider what one employee is paid, you have to look at all employees who are similarly situated, all individuals who perform work of a comparable nature, and the qualifications they bring to their jobs to ensure that employees are paid in comparable ways. And you have to do so within the resources you have available. So again, we like to pay employees real money. We have to ensure that our pay decisions can be sustained into the future in light of other objectives, other priorities in our organizations. If you're a supervisor and you don't have budgetary authority, you're responsible for consulting and collaborating with those who do in order to ensure that salary decisions are made within the scope of your budget. All right, so with that knowledge, let's talk about how to talk about pay. As I said, I want to give you some advice on how you can go about this conversation in an effective way. First off, I recommend that you be thoughtful about your timing. It's really important that employees and supervisors talk about performance, the value an individual brings to the organization, ways to enhance their relationships on a regular basis. This is our battle cry every performance evaluation period because routine feedback is important, not only because you want to know where you stand based on your performance, but also because you want to know where you stand in terms of your pay. It can be awkward to talk about pay. It's difficult to bring up, but if you're having routine conversations with your supervisor, it makes it much more easy to begin that conversation. So if those aren't happening now, I encourage you to work with your supervisor to set up regular check-ins. If you want to talk about pay specifically, I do recommend that you set up a meeting just to talk about that topic. That way you don't get distracted by other task-related items or things on your agenda that can distract from this important topic. Additionally, it's helpful to have this conversation before commitments are made to budgets. Now, you can talk anytime, absolutely, but we're a bit more flexible with committing to salary increases and to other budgetary priorities when we're in the budget planning cycle. This typically happens in the early spring. As you likely know, mass salary increases are just about to take effect because the new fiscal year begins on July 1st. But our planning begins when the legislative session ends and the university knows how much money is being delegated by the state. And so it might be helpful to consider beginning this kind of conversation in February, March or so, after performance evaluations have ended, but before salary planning begins, or perhaps before a contract or grant submission is about to go in, which you know may contribute to your fund or to funds for your position. It's also helpful to recognize when it's not a good time to talk about pay. If you know there have been recent reductions, perhaps that you have had colleagues who have been laid off, or you know there are vacancies that won't be filled in your organization. At those times, there's more pressure on supervisors and leaders to reduce spending rather than increase it. So there may not be an appetite to discuss salaries at that time. Additionally, when there's changes in leadership, there are going to be changes in your organization's direction and the way work is delegated down through the organization. So it may be helpful to give that new leader some time to get situated, to allow things to shift and settle before pursuing a conversation about pay. All right, so the timing is right. You're ready to have this conversation. How do you go about it exactly? To begin, I recommend that you start off with a goal to be open and appropriately transparent. As an employee, be clear on why you're asking to talk about your salary, focusing on your unique contributions to your organization. As I mentioned before, it's helpful to have a meeting just about this topic and to be open about the topic of the meeting rather than secretive. You want your supervisor to be prepared to be honest, open, transparent with you too. As you talk to your supervisor, focus on your contributions. I know it can be so tempting to point fingers at other employees and to say, well, I should have an increase because of what this other employee is paid and how they're performing. The reason why I discourage you from doing this is that it will distract attention away from you and why you warrant your salary to be reconsidered. Additionally, it may bring up topics that you don't have a business need to know about performance levels or pay decisions for others. So instead, stick to yourself and really promote why you feel you should have this increase. Also remember, there are a lot of factors that affect pay level, factors that may be outside your organization's control. And so think again about that total rewards wheel and consider what would be important to you to potentially complement a salary increase or stand alone from salary increase. If you're a supervisor, recognize your employee for bringing this to your attention and being willing to talk about it. And just like I said for employees, rather than focus on other people, their performance, their pay, focus on process. Be appropriately transparent about the factors you take into account when making decisions about classification and compensation, the processes and the perspectives of your organization as you talk to your employees. Additionally, I recommend that you demonstrate your understanding. As an employee, don't expect to walk away with a commitment from your supervisor. They're going to need to take some time to really consider your inquiry and any options that exist. And part of that means looking at budget resources and equity considerations as they evaluate your own salary. As a supervisor, understand that compensation matters. It is an important way of conveying the value your employee brings to your organization. And just like I advised for employees, think about total rewards. What are some other ways that you can demonstrate that value to the individual? As you close your meeting, talk about next steps. Be clear about the follow-through that will happen as you leave this conversation. So as a supervisor, next steps might include a closer review of the information the employees shared, a closer review of pay levels across your organization, as well as consultation with leadership. I recommend that you talk with your supervisor and higher level leaders to understand how do they consider pay across the organization? What factors do they take into account? What budgetary restrictions or opportunities exist? Maybe now you can't afford an increase, but perhaps in the near future you can. And what approvals are needed to actually effectuate a change to an employee's title or pay? You may also have to talk to other people, particularly us at HR. So we have a whole team of HR professionals called HR consultants who work with departments in navigating the different compensation mechanisms available. They are able to advise you on not only which mechanism is best, but what's allowable with the different mechanisms we have. So before committing to any particular increases or changes, you'll need to consult with us to ensure that you can follow through on that commitment. It can take some time. There are a lot of people to talk to, policies, forms, processes. So be sure to follow up with your employee appropriately about the status of their request, recognizing that it's being taken seriously. Now, it's possible that a salary increase can't be afforded or won't be done for one reason or another at this time. As you think about total rewards, really consider the many different factors that can specifically convey value to this individual employee. How do you know what's important to an employee? Ask. Perhaps before you leave that conversation about pay, ask them, what other things matter to you that I could potentially offer? Here are some suggestions of ways to leverage this total rewards wheel to meet your individual employees' needs. There are other forms of compensation. So not just base salary, we also have paid time off and rewards. There are different ways that we can offer money to employees. Now, it's not as much as increasing an employee's base pay, but it is something tangible that can convey value. You can also encourage your employee to utilize tuition remission to enhance their knowledge, skills, and abilities. Introduce them to others who could potentially mentor them or share valuable career advice. Maybe even allowing them time to shadow other professionals who work in areas of interest to the employee. Also, think of ways you can make their current job interesting and engaging, offering challenging tasks and stretch goals, enabling them to go to conferences, trainings, webinars in order to improve their on-the-job skills. Right now, as we think about returning to work after COVID, I think work-life effectiveness is particularly important. Maybe you can offer a flexible schedule or alternative work arrangement that would be valuable to the employee. And recognize them publicly, privately, whatever the employee really prefers, to tell them that they're doing a good job. It It's important to note that there are still policies, processes, and forms associated with these examples, so still consult with us to navigate those different options. Before I end and go to questions, I want to point you to some other resources that may prove helpful to you. First off, we employ a lot of HR superheroes. There are a ton of people across the institution who are in a position to provide advice or help you navigate different situations. One individual is right in your organization. We call them HR agents, and they are designated in every school, college, and division across the institution. Now, their job classifications are not HR agent. That's a designation from us. They may hold all sorts of different titles. So I encourage you to go to our link in order to find the HR agent for your specific organization. I mentioned before, our HR consultants provide a breadth of advice to employees, managers, and department leaders. HR consultants are assigned to specific organizations, and those organizations are listed through the link here. I know that's not an easy link to follow. I can drop it in chat. You can also find it through the HR website by going to hr.unm.edu, department resources, and then HR consultants, or find your consultant. And of course, us in Comp. We are also in the Division of Human Resources, and you can reach us at the email listed here. Additionally, our website has a wealth of resources. If you heard me drop a term that you didn't understand, you can access our glossary online. Additionally, we have our compensation mechanisms posted. We call these comp guidelines. They stipulate the rules and the processes for pursuing one kind of comp mechanism versus another. So you're welcome to take a look at those. Especially if you're a supervisor, I recommend you take some time to familiarize yourself with these different options. Our job descriptions hold a wealth of information. Here's an example of a particular job description, and you can see information about union status, the grade level assigned, the general duties and responsibilities expected of a position, and so on. All of our job descriptions are published at jobdescriptions.unm.edu. And for just a moment, I want to highlight one particular thing in job descriptions that as an employee myself has been hugely helpful as I've considered my own career growth. I want to point out the knowledge, skills, and abilities section. If you're interested in growing and developing to a higher level position, go look that position up on our job description website and scroll down to the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Look at what it takes to perform that job and consider, what do you need to develop in order to do it? Also, as a tidbit, should you ever apply for a job for me, as a supervisor, when I'm interviewing staff, I look at these KSAs to figure out what should I ask to figure out who should work for me. And so it really is a valuable resource to employees as well as supervisors. Additionally, on our website, we have what I call a stay interview guide. It has a much longer title you see in tan. This is a super helpful resource to supervisors. It helps to talk to employees before they come to you asking for more pay, to really understand what motivates, engages, and retains them in their jobs. This stay interview guide offers a bunch of different prompts of potential questions you could ask your employee to gauge whether a salary increase would really help them feel more interested in staying with your organization. And then last but not least, we offer many different trainings through employee and organizational development. Here are some suggested ones you can access through Learning Central. And as a note, the training that you've just received today is in development to go on Learning Central. So if it's something you want to revisit at a later date, or if you want to encourage others to look at, I hope to have that published soon. Also, if you have feedback about things that you think would be helpful to clarify or include, I'd love to hear from you. Please email us at comp@unm.edu. But for now, let's answer questions you have at this time. You are welcome to go ahead and go off mute to ask questions, or Amy, if there are things that have come up in the chat, I'm happy to respond to those.
We don't have anything in the chat. Oh, here we go.
Can employees meet with HR consultants to get information about reclassification, raises, etc.? My supervisor is often confused by the UNM system, and if I could come prepared with that information, it would be helpful to them.
Yeah, absolutely. We meet regularly with employees to try to navigate different things. Now, know that when it comes to actually requesting some kind of action, employees can't initiate that kind of request. But I appreciate that you're trying to go to your supervisor fully equipped and helping them navigate these systems. So by all means, we are happy to talk with you about the different mechanisms, when they're used, how they're used. I referenced how to contact your HR consultant. They are a good place to start because sometimes things come up that aren't directly related to compensation and you want kind of that whole picture of advice. So I encourage you to reach out to your HR consultant. And you can also contact us at Comp and we're happy to provide you with some advice. All right, April, I see your question about career ladders. So career ladders, I'm so glad you brought that up. I love career ladders because they're proactive. They are a defined development plan to help an employee grow from their current job into a higher level job. Now, that higher level job has to be needed in your organization. So for instance, maybe you are in a admin assistant 2 role and an admin assistant 3 has recently left. You're interested in that job and you want to see if you could engage in a career ladder. Your department could potentially offer that to you and then develop a learning plan. Maybe you'll shadow others, maybe go to trainings in order to gain the knowledge, skills, and abilities. So again, take a look at the job description in order to operate at that higher level. When we do career ladders, there is a salary increase typically associated with that at the end of the career ladder in order to recognize that you'll then be operating at a higher level position. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have other questions about career ladders that didn't get answered just there, April, feel free to ask again in chat or go off mute. Oh, I'm glad you've heard of a career ladder today. So Joanna says, my supervisors have never heard of a career ladder. It's understandable. Your supervisor has a lot on their plate and there's so many HR things. It's easy to have things that slip by that they don't know about. I'm glad you've joined our presentation today. So now you've heard about it. Our comp mechanisms are all posted on that comp guideline page. And so one thing that might be helpful is you've done this presentation now. It might be helpful to go schedule some time with your supervisor right away. Maybe not specifically to talk about your pay unless you want to. Now you know all about how to do that. But maybe you could use this training as a launching point. Say, hey, I went to this training all about talking about pay. I learned about some really cool options like career ladders. Can I show you what I learned? Show them the comp mechanisms, talk to them about what your interests are, and then they'll be able to learn about this too and potentially utilize these different resources. And thanks,
Stacie,
Carrie.
oh,
go ahead.
Stacie, I have one that just came in the chat, which is an employee who is established in career, but was brought in second quartile and are still there years later. Can you give them a raise even if the scope of their job hasn't changed?
This is something we've really noticed is that we have many wonderful employees who stay with UNM for a long time, and we're so grateful to have them. But over time, there haven't been a lot of pay increases. And so your pay may have kind of stagnated at a certain level of the salary band. We're really striving to create more opportunities to adjust employee pay levels to ensure they are aligned along that salary band. I think historically, employees have, oh, it looks like I may be cutting in and out. Uh-oh.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Let me grab my headphones. They seem to help. So let me grab those real
Sure
quick.
Sure thing. And actually, maybe that's a wonderful time. Give everybody just a chance to put some more questions down in the chat if you'd like to do so.
Thanks for bearing with me. I'm going on my third audio option here. Hopefully this
That's why we've got backups for backups, right, Stacie?
Sure do. How's this? Is this clearer?
This is much better.
Okay, good. So the question again was, what if you came in, you were early career at the time, paid fairly low, and your pay hasn't changed? This is a struggle we face as an institution. So compensation is working on opportunities to enhance employee pay in order to ensure that our employees don't have to change jobs in order to get salary increases. Also recognizing that the mass salary increases aren't enough to keep up with competitive pay levels. So I kind of briefly touched on resources underway. They're very much still in development, so it's hard for me to commit to what they are exactly and when they're coming. But we're working on something called the Salary Placement and Equity Tool. This is a resource that will exist to help us ensure that employees are paid based on those qualifications and ensure that we are administering equity in a consistent manner. With that, there will be opportunities to make pay adjustments simply based on the need to pay employees effectively without necessarily classification changes, as well as more opportunities to adjust pay for equity reasons. So I don't have a super straightforward answer other than I appreciate that feedback because it's added fuel to help us move in that direction. I still encourage you to talk with your supervisor so that as opportunities do come up to adjust your pay, they know that you're a priority and they can pursue those opportunities.
Stacie, we are at 5 minutes.
All right, thanks, Amy. Lots of great questions here. I'm not sure if we'll have time to answer them all, but I do want to do my best here. Grace asks, does HR have a tool to provide a lens into whether a unit is offering fair pay across the unit? Administering pay in a consistent manner. This new tool that I mentioned is going to help us do that in a way that's consistent. However, this is really for leadership to look across their organization to ensure that pay equity. I do think that there are always opportunities to enhance transparency about equity so that you know where you stand. And then let's see, Haley asks that I mentioned education as one of the many things that impact compensation. If you take a course through continuing ed, does this count as additional education to HR? So that's really at the discretion of leadership to decide. The key question we're looking at is how does your additional education relate to the job you're performing? Now, when it comes to equity and determining salary levels, we utilize formal degrees for determining where you should be paid. But we recognize that there are many ways to enhance your skills, including trainings. And so your department leaders are encouraged to look at your skill sets, your background, the trainings you've done as they think about pay. So I don't think that completing a particular course is going to result in some kind of salary adjustment for you, but I do think it's one more thing that your leaders should take into consideration when they're figuring out your salary level. The pay adjustments don't work on us that are grant funded though. So that's a very good point, Grace. Budget is a huge contributor to making these pay decisions. And so when you're paid through a contract or a grant, that budget is going to be dependent on another party. That's why it can be really difficult for us to make decisions about pay or to commit to salary increases when those resources aren't a guarantee. However, we can take the money we've had to make as effective decisions as we have, or as we can. Regardless of who funds your salary, your supervisor should still be evaluating your qualifications to your job and that pay alignment that I described in order to make a decision. All right, so I do think we're just about at time here. So it looks like there are things that we're not able to address directly. We'll do our best to follow up with everyone who has input a question in the chat box. If you have not had a chance to ask your question and you still want to follow up with us, here's our email again, comp@unm.edu. And as Amy mentioned over chat, I would so appreciate if you could participate in this survey. That's going to be helpful not only as we look to convert this to Learning Central, but also for Staff Success Days. This is the first one of what we hope will be many. And so your feedback will help ensure that future events are effective.
Thank you so much, Stacie. This was really, really helpful.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it. All right, I'm going to stick around for just another minute to see what comes in over chat.
Great. And yes, Stacie, that's an excellent point. We're happy to leave the room open if folks have some additional questions. I think, probably just for the sake of time, maybe we'll cap that based on your schedule, since you've been going for just over an hour now, but happy to leave the room open for a little bit if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I can probably give it 5 more minutes.
Great.
So if you asked a question and you're still on the line, I'm happy to answer them, but I can also follow up. So for the comp team who's still on,
Yep.
if you could look at the chat and make sure that we follow up with all questions
Stacie,
after Gloria's.
We've also got the chat saved, so we can go back and
That's
take
super
a
helpful.
look. And this is one that I would love to schedule in Learning Central, Stacie, if we ever could.
Yeah.
This
No,
type
we are
of,
working on it.
That's wonderful. I've
Yeah.
been here going on 12 years, and I thought I had a great grasp of this, and I learned so much. Thank
I'm
you.
so glad. So glad to hear that. The Learning Central training will have additional content in it. The one thing that we didn't cover today was an overview of all those different mechanisms. So these questions about career ladders are good ones.
That's excellent.
As well, we'll go over at a high level what they all entail, as well as for supervisors, how do you actually craft a request?
That's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent.
So let's see, is there a course or materials that are perfect, that are geared to managers or supervisors that they can access easily to learn about options for their employees? I found that most supervisors have no idea as to what options are available to get their employees more money. Totally understandable. Our website has a lot of information, but it can be kind of overwhelming. So that's why we are developing training for Learning Central. That training is also captured during employee life cycle. That is a training that all new managers engage in. So if your manager has not done employee life cycle, I was about to do the acronym, or if it's been a long time and they're interested in a refresher, we do cover the same content about different comp mechanisms, how to submit a request in an employee life cycle, and it will be on Learning Central soon. Are there documents online that show the career path, the next step? We do have a list of what we call predefined career ladders, but I wouldn't call it as helpful as I want it to be. What I would say is a good step is to look at the job description itself. Particularly for job series, these are jobs that have a 1, 2, 3, or a job and then a senior job. We write something called distinguishing characteristics. They're an area in the job description that says, this is what makes an admin 2 different from an admin 1, and then an admin 3 different from an admin 2. So if you're interested in engaging in a career ladder, your job is already in a job series, and your organization has a need for that next level, take a look at the knowledge, skills, and abilities and the distinguishing characteristics to get an idea of what it takes to move to that higher level job. Even if it isn't in a job series, I think the KSAs, the official job descriptions, are a really good resource to utilize. And if you're not sure what kind of development plan would help you get there, consult with your supervisor. And if you're a supervisor, talk with us. HR can help guide you on developing a development plan. Good, good, good. Glad to hear there are lots of positive feedback. Oh, I just didn't know what the next level up is. So yeah, I know they're not straight up numbers. There are codes associated, but those aren't going to be super helpful to you. I would look at the grade levels and the titles to know what position builds to the next one. When we create job series, so jobs that are all related to each other, we try to title them in a common way. So for instance, we have compensation specialist and compensation specialist senior, a grade 13, a grade 14. And it also has those distinguishing characteristics. So you can kind of see, you can line them right up next to each other, see how they're different from one another. The same is true of other job families. So you'll see admin assistant 1, admin assistant 2. If they don't have a common title, it doesn't mean you can't career ladder to that position. You still could. It just means that they're not in a defined job family where the work is comparable to each other. And perhaps there's going to be more of a development and growth plan since the job is slightly different in nature. So hopefully, Jamie, that answers your question. I've got 1 more minute if folks are still on the line. I'll stop share for now. All right, I'm going to take your silence as a sign that we are good to go.
Thank you so much, Stacie. This is wonderful, really great information. And just as an aside, you and I can always get together and chat. Anything you need for help with Learning Central development, that's with me now. So I'm happy to help with anything putting together any of that. So
fantastic. Thank you.
Great. All right, so glad everybody was able to join us. I think we can go ahead and stop the recording. And if